Okay, gentlemen, we are live.
Already? Oh, what's up, everybody? I'm in my new studio.
Holy shit. What'd you pay
Looks
for
good,
that
huh?
studio? Same thing you paid for the old one?
Yeah. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Police Off the Cuff After Hours. My name is Mark DeMeo. I'm one of your hosts. I'm here with my co-host, Bill Cannon. What's up, Bill?
Feeling good, man. Although, I heard we're going to have an ice storm tonight. Did you hear that?
I heard it. Yeah, it's just bad in New York. We haven't had any luck at all lately with the weather.
I feel
But
like going to Florida, man.
We got some great luck tonight. We have a fantastic guest. He's a retired NYPD Detective Sergeant. He has the master's degree in criminal justice. He's an adjunct professor at John Jay. He's a recipient of the NYPD Medal of Valor. And he could also be seen on major news networks as a police analyst. What's up, Joe? How are you? This is Joe Giacalone, folks.
How are you, Mayo? Hey, Bill.
What's going on, man?
I forgot to mention you. He's my former boss.
Yeah, that's why I used to have a full head of hair when I had you.
I love these guys with their no maintenance haircuts, man. You know?
I got to tell you, you're a great boss. It was a lot of fun working under you.
Thanks, man.
You know, I worked with you when I got to the training unit. Finally, you had done most of your work outside. In the detective bureau. You were. Why don't you give us a little bit, some Bronx? I know you worked in the Bronx.
I was a cop in the Bronx, and like everything else, I got promoted to sergeant. I went to the 7th precinct in Brownsville. I cut my teeth there for a couple of years, almost 4 years. And then I went to go to the detective bureau, and I got sidetracked into the internal affairs bureau for 25 months.
How was the cheese at the internal affairs unit? Did you eat the Gouda, the cheddar, or the mozzarella? What were you eating?
Honestly, they couldn't wait for me to leave. They really couldn't. Actually, one of the inspectors used to call me effing Giacalone. And actually, when somebody finally called me Joe one time, somebody goes, "That's your first name?" Because every time he would curse at me all the time. But I was in the 110 squad. And I was in the training unit, and I was the best job I had though was I was the commanding officer of the Bronx Cold Case Squad. So I did that for a couple of years. Great job, great people I worked with, and that was one of the only jobs where you can actually say you had some satisfaction because you were closing cases that were years open and giving people closure, and that whole family bit was really good.
That's pretty amazing when you get to close a case that's been open for so long. And then usually something forensic leads you to the closing of it,
Yep, forensics had a lot to do with it. There was a great detective there. His name was Mark Tebbins.
I loved Mark. Great guy.
Yeah,
man.
He passed away. I mean, right after he retired, it was a shame. But Mark put together a case that kind of made us famous. It was a serial killer case, and he tied this guy to 4 murders and 7 rapes. And the whole thing about going to the Dominican Republic and getting them out. I mean, it was one of those made for TV movies. One of those things. I mean, it was a great case. But Mark and Tony Padilla, great detectives. I mean, these guys. If God forbid something happened to you, you would want them working on your case.
Mark was such a low key guy and such an even tempered guy, but he was so good. He was such a good detective.
And he was probably one of the most famous detectives we had. And you wouldn't have known it because they wrote books about him, like the Wild Cowboys.
Yeah.
About the Dominican drug gangs up in the 3-4. I mean, that was all him. He was doing all that stuff as a young guy, and then he just carried it over. I mean, he was a phenomenal detective, and he was huge too. That was the other thing.
Yeah, he was about 6'5", right?
Yeah, 6'5" and like 280. And Tony was about 6'4". He was probably about 220. And then you had the 2 little guys, me and Steve. So we would go into a place and he'd be like, "Hey, listen, you either talk to us or you talk to those 2 guys." And they like look around you and they're like, "Yeah, we'll talk to you." But
what do you think about the use now of familial DNA?
Well, hey, listen, it's got to be one of these tools that we have to take advantage of. I mean, you're looking at any of these forensic genealogy things. Of course, you look at the Golden State Killer. We were doing stuff like that way back when, right before I left the police department. The NYPD was dabbling in that. And like everything else, New York State had really strict rules, but I think If you remember the Katrina
Katrina
Vetrano case.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that one kind of opened up the floodgates, I think, because they were able to use all that techniques and stuff like that to do these things. So I think New York is going to have an easier time going through it. And listen, like everything else, once you get through the courts, New York State is a fry court, right? It's a fry standard. So you have this huge amount of a lot of obstacles. Let's put it that way. For those of that, without getting into the technical thing, there's a lot of obstacles in New York to get something admissible in court, and that's the fry standard. And there's only like 12 states that use it. Of course, New York's got to be one of them. But
Joe, it seems like every time we get a great tool to help us solve cases, some civil libertarian tries to take it away from us. In California, they're trying to take away facial recognition.
Well, and it's not just there. I think I just read another article where it's another state. I'm trying to think it was. I believe it's Minnesota. They are trying to take away the facial recognition too.
Joe, it's unfair against the people that commit the crimes.
Well, I mean, you've got a lot of new technology that's always under fire, right? The facial recognition, the license plate readers. Yeah, I mean, Bill. I mean, license plate readers played an important role in solving a lot of cases. Especially in New York City, where you have tolls and cameras everywhere. I mean, you can't get out of New York City without getting your license plate read.
A terrorist blows his nose, and we got it on the license plate reader, right?
Like I said, it would be a shame if they lost that. Now, like we also know too that the police departments, when they get new toys, they tend to play with them a little too much and break them too. Yeah, so you got to be careful of that. We saw that with Stop, Question, and Frisk, right, where they turned it into a numbers game. They blow up that toy. So you just hope that they've learned from lessons in the past, which I doubt, but you hope that they don't mess it up.
I think West Virginia just decided to get rid of their gang database. I know it's in West Virginia. I think it's in Virginia. I just think it's West Virginia, but that's something the NYPD decided to do, which was get rid of the gang database. And Virginia's reasoning for it was that it's since gangbangers are mostly people of color, non-whites, then we should get rid of the database.
Well, we've seen that, and I think in LA too. The LA Police Department got rid of theirs too. So, you're running blindly, so to speak. But like everything else, one of the problems that we've seen with these databases is that if they have somebody, once you get in it, you're always on it. Even if it might be find out like, months or years later that you weren't a gang member, they tend to keep those names in there. And that's where the police department needs to step up their game and update the list. Remember when we had to get photos, right? We couldn't use a photo that was the courts had basically closed off to us. Yeah, they got to do the same thing with these databases. I think that's the only way if they can keep them running if they do that.
Did you see yesterday? There was a party bus that came out of Brooklyn, and they pulled 8 guns off it. Do you know they waited 3 hours to pull that bus over? And I mean, was it safety reasons or was it political reasons? I don't know.
It's got to be with the safety reasons.
They were posing with their guns on social media, and they knew had guns on this bus. I'm just saying, I think it could possibly also be political reasons.
Yeah, I'm sure they had to have the okay to do it. That's one of the things right now that I'm sure that, and I'm talking about they got to call the mayor. That's my opinion. Anyway, and go, is it okay if we pull this bus over?
I wouldn't call the mayor for shit. I'll tell you that. I'd pull that bus over and have 14 under and then let the mayor know about it.
Well, you know what? The only thing maybe they were online with the assistant district attorney saying like, how do you want to handle this? Because getting those pictures, listen, social media is a treasure trove for law enforcement, right? Just look at the case you just talked about with these people pointing guns on the bus, right? They don't learn lessons. It's all about like, look at me. Hey, everybody, look at me. And I got my guns. And people think like, oh, if you keep on saying this, people are going to stop doing it. No, they won't. They can't help themselves.
No, they can't. You're right. Look, they used to go on YouTube and say, oh, I busted a cap in this guy's ass last night. I mean, hey, thanks. Thanks for telling us.
Who said that detective work was hard sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easy, but like everything else, you have to make sure, it's important that they follow that chain of custody about how they identify these things on Instagram or Facebook or whatever they have, because as well as I do, you can lose a case on just where'd you get this image from? Well, I don't remember. I mean, that could be a problem.
Well, look, a lot of times, especially with juveniles, we obtained photos from social media because we didn't have photos, you know?
You know, it's interesting that you bring it up about social media. I remember when I first got to the training unit and you were the sergeant. I've told the story before because you've been a guest on our show in the past, but why not? I'll cut it short. I walk in, and the reason why I was dying to get into the training unit was because I had this comedy career and I wanted to be able to perform at night. And this was the perfect situation for me. So I get there and I meet you and I'm happy to be there, and you welcome me in and you go, oh, just so you know, you have to do a presentation, a 1-hour presentation, and you're going to have to teach it, when they come in for INTAC, which is in-service training. And I was like, okay, so what do you want me to do it on? And then you look at me and you go, what were you doing in the squad? And then I was like, I was on Facebook a lot. I was being a wise ass. And then you go, okay, do it on that. Do it. I was like, what? And you go, do it on how to catch bad guys off of social media. So I did. I created this whole PowerPoint on how to grab bad guys off of social media. And it became a hit. Not only that, but I had it presented in front of Pulaski, who was the chief of detectives at the time. That was very nerve-wracking. Then he made me go from command to command with a presentation. He made me do it in INTAC, and I had it presented at the homicide course too. So you made me a star. You really did.
Yeah, that'll learn you, right?
Mark, I just want to shout out to some of our live chatters. Peter Pranzo, one of our biggest fans, the great lieutenant. Scott Wagner, great 2-3 detective. Diane B, Richella Pranzo. Peter and Richella can't do anything apart. They're attached at the hip. We'd love to have them. MC Audio, an up-and-coming brilliant podcaster. And, of course, Bill Ryan, KP Johnson. Who else we got here? Cat in the Hat, Millie Molly, Mrs. T, Jeffrey Brzezinski. That's all. That's about it right now. Oh, excuse me. 12-Step Woman. Welcome, everyone, to the show.
You didn't forget Scotty Wagner, did you?
No, I mentioned him. I said he was a
Okay,
great
good,
2-3 detective from the past. A blast from the past.
Since we're on the break, should we do the commercial?
Go ahead, do the commercial.
All right. Joe, you probably don't realize this, but we have a sponsor.
All right.
Yeah. And our sponsor is the best hot sauce in the world, Joe. It's called Silk City Hot Sauce, and it's made in small batches with pure ingredients. Locally grown peppers are the foundation of every bottle of Silk City Hot Sauce. There are several flavors from mild to wild. And you got to see these labels, man. They're all original artwork, and you can all check them out if you go to silkcityhotsauce.com. And if you put the coupon code, which is OTC for off the cuff, you'll get a 15% discount. And the guy who owns the company, Jeff Levine, is a great guy. He's helping us out. He's our first sponsor. If you're interested in also having us promote your business, your small business, reach out to us. We're on Gmail, OTCpod, POD1, the number 1, OTCpod, the number 1 at gmail.com. And now back to our show.
Joe, before we were talking about Ed Mullins, who in my opinion is one of the greatest union presidents in policing, probably in the country. CCRB is trying to go after him with that new discipline matrix. And I don't think the law allows them to do that. But these little weasels and CCRB with this matrix that everyone thinks is the greatest thing. Let's punish cops for everything they do. Ed Mullins put out a letter saying, I'm going to say whatever I want, and let CCRB try to come after me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I read the letter. I mean, it was, pretty much like in your face kind of thing, like it's always been. So he's throwing it out. It basically threw the gauntlet down, and we're going to see what happens with this. Like everything else, the civility in social media and the civility in a lot of other places kind of broken down. We want to see, we want to restore some of that civility too. But what's happening in policing in the public and the anti-cop atmosphere, I mean, it's really getting to be too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Duty Ron, thank you so much for that $10 super chat. We're back monetized on YouTube. We were put in the doghouse for about a week. duty, Ron. Thank you.
Well, Joe, you bring up an interesting point in that, for some reason, the macro of this whole thing is every single police department in the country is connected. And there's been a big call for defund the policing. Minneapolis was on the forefront of that. And now it appears that they have rescinded.
Now they want the police again,
They've just gotten several, I think it was $6 or $8 million to hire at least 100 or 200 police officers. They got academy classes going in. They can't get them soon enough. And that's an interesting point right now. And also in New York City, we were also talking about defunding policing, and then now they want over 1,000 more cops on the subways right now because of.
Yeah, they called him the Ripper. Come on, the guy was a Ripper. He was an EDP that was going around killing people. And isn't that de Blasio's wife was in charge of the EDPs? She had $1 billion to take care of that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, that was First, well, let's take the Minnesota one too. Yeah, the whole defunding thing's not working out too well for them. And I don't know if you're going to get anybody to take that job. And at this point, unless they're going to take the training and they're going to get out, one or the other. Good luck with that. That's all I could say. But what happened the other day on the A train, and what's happening, and then there was 2 more stabbings on other trains yesterday.
And they're pushing people on the tracks too. There was a couple of those
at an alarming rate. I think there's 8 homicides already, and I think last year there was over 5. So that's something to definitely be considered, especially when New York City's trying to come back, right? So if you're trying to come back and people aren't going to feel safe on the subways, because remember, we know as cops or former cops that perception about crime is really what you're fighting. It's not about the actual crime stats of the things. If people fear that they're going to be attacked or robbed or something like that, that's impossible to combat.
Absolutely. Also, 2 more super chats. Bill Ryan of Ryan Investigation, thank you for the $5 super chat. 12-Step Woman, thank you for the $5 super chat. You guys are great. See, that penalty box hurt us for a week, but we're back.
Well, in regards to the subway, they were talking to our mayor here in New York City, asking him what's going on, and he was kind of sort of brushing it off. This is New York City, crime happens, which is it's an old edict. I mean, it goes way back to the 70s and the 80s. Well, we have a lot of people here, and it would be easy to say back then, but we've already proven that given the chance, the NYPD can do their job. And we can keep crime down, and we don't have to deal with this. And that's not. It doesn't seem like that's what this mayor wants.
You know something? When I look at it, Joe, when you went through the whole Comstat thing, and we used to go to Comstat, and they would harp on everything, right? And I was saying the poor bastard who's in charge when crime starts going the other way, but it's going the other way, and it's going the other way big because it all starts with the mayor. And because this mayor is just a registered jackass, crime is up triple digits in shootings and murders. That's enough to get anyone fired.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you saw it. I did an interview about when O'Neill left and Shea took over. And I said in the interview with the AP, said, this is like a game of musical chairs. And you don't want to be without a chair when the music stops because it's coming. It's coming because people only remember what happened last, right? You'll be remembered as the PC that had, triple digits in homicides, but because that's what people only remember what happened last, and that's a shame because where we came from to where we are, one of the things that really makes me nuts is when people say, "Well, it's not as bad as it was in 1990." It's like
it's getting there. It's going to get there though.
But and here's my answer to that: 1990 didn't happen overnight. It happened over decades of the 60s and the 70s and 80s and the decay of the city. And I would say, I guarantee you there were 2 people in the 70s that were having this same exact conversation. Well, it's not as, hey, listen, I know it's not 1950, but you know what? We're not doing too bad.
Right.
You don't want to have to get to a point where you're saying, like, what do we do now? You have a chance to stop it. But I don't think they have the wherewithal to be able, or the actual, I guess, with chutzpah to actually do it.
They absolutely don't have that. And in fact, they are on the side of the criminal. They absolutely are. I mean, they're releasing guys with guns the next day. they're releasing parolees, cop killers they're releasing. They do not have the wherewithal, you're 100% right, to fight crime.
And if you really think about this, take a look at that, what just happened with the 4 people stabbed, the 2 people murdered on the A train the other day. I'm still waiting for the press conference being held by the Department of Homeless Services. I'm still waiting to hear their boss answer out how they felt, because everybody involved in this incident, the 4 victims and the alleged suspect, were all homeless people. So could you imagine if the NYPD was, something like that happened? They would be called out on the carpet. There would be some huge accountability, and they would be demanding answers and defunding talk and candlelight vigils and you name it. But we're not seeing that, and I have to ask why.
The reason why you're not seeing that is because there's no real plan. They just want the cops to back off and not deal with the homeless, but they don't have the clinicians in place yet. They don't have the strategy in place yet. They don't know what to do. But all we know is that we had to defund the police. So now they don't want uniform officers getting involved with the homeless, but they don't have the answer ready yet. So also they don't have the leader yet to answer for why they're not ready yet.
Well, and even, if you take even that, the issue that comes down to is, we know as cops, right? If to take away EDPs, we'd be like, go ahead.
Exactly.
I don't think there's a cop alive today that would say, oh, no, let us keep on doing the EDP jobs.
No, keep the EDPs. We love it. Yeah.
No, right. If you can get people well trained to answer those calls out and they can do, that's fine. But here's the problem, guys, and nobody's talking about this. There is no follow-up. So if you hire a clinician to go to the house, my son's not taking his meds, how many times you've been on those calls, and you get there and the guy's trying to throw himself out of the window, right? And if they can get them under control and they can get them to a facility and get them some help, great. But what's the follow-up? Are they going to release them 2 days later or a day later, and then we have to do this all over again? See, that's the problem. So they are putting the proverbial cart before the horse. They are not looking at what happens after the fact. So the first initial action, if you want to have a clinician, I'm okay with that. But what's the process after that? Nobody's talking about that process.
And Joe, we know. They also don't understand how dangerous it is to deal with an EDP, because they want to call these people violence interrupters and they want to send social workers to EDP jobs by themselves. I mean, who is thinking up this plan,
Well, I have yet to hear any of anybody who might be doing this job talking about that.
Not yet. One.
Yeah.
Not one spokesperson for that whatever they're going for. Nobody knows who the leader is. We just don't want the cops to deal with it. So in the meantime, these people are in limbo.
Well, like I said, I'm all for not having the cops involved with it. But the issue that comes down to is, if you think you're going to eliminate the cops totally, I think you're mistaken on that. I mean, absolutely mistaken. There's just no way. I mean, how many times have you been on an EDP that just went sideways on you as soon as you walked into the door? Or somebody was wrecking the house before you even got there.
Peter Pranzo, thank you so much for that $10 super chat. SW Dessert Duchess, hello. 12-step woman, MC's Audio. You're going to be a superstar in this business. Would you put Scott Wagner on your show? Get him on your show one of these days.
It looks like there's always some skirmish going on in the chat room. I don't know why, Mike. MC Audio, you couldn't live with your own failure, and where did that lead you? Back to me. I guess that's a quote from Thanos, the Avengers. If you don't know who Mike Giacalone is, he's also a young journalist, and he's coming up, and he's an interesting kid. He's very, very smart. He might remind me of a little bit of a young Joe Giacalone. Very, very smart.
Mark, the super chatters they want you to talk about your background. Your new green screen. Could you just spend a few minutes on that, or a minute or two?
Well, I got a green screen, and then I'm in the process of trying to figure out what kind of background I want. And the first one I had was from Times Square. Bill was like, "Nah, it's too loud.
It was way too bright."
And then I don't know. We'll figure it out. But for tonight, this is what I think. This background's cool, but it might be a little bit too much. We'll figure it out. But Joe, I wanted to talk to you. You said that you made a comment that, I said this on. I was interviewed about this, or I was part of an interview on this, which leads us to your work on as a TV analyst, police analyst for major networks, and you were on TV a lot. I mean, we've had Dr. Darren Porcher on the show. He seems to kind of have taken your place as the go-to guy here in New York, but that's because I think you moved, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I've done, even now, I'm still doing some TV stuff, but I've kind of gotten away from, like the regular in-studio stuff. With the pandemic, being on Zoom is pretty easy. So a lot of the news reporters that I used to deal with all the time. But I kind of gotten away from that. I've been really doing more radio, newspaper, and online stuff. I've been doing it for a long time. It's been 8 years, and like I said, I was in the Post like 3 times in the last week, and I had a great quote in the Queen's Chronicle. They've been actually taking some of these. My wife reads these things and goes, "What is wrong with you?" So it is what it is. What I like about it is I get a chance to actually, when the cops do right, to be able to stand up for them, because apparently a lot of that doesn't go on anymore. And Mayo, you know me, I'm not one for pulling punches. I tell it like it is. I don't sugarcoat anything.
Well, that's why me and Bill put the show together, was because just to get a positive voice out for law enforcement. So you went into it with the right idea. Like you said, you've been doing it for 8 years. It seemed like you were on TV all the time here.
Yeah.
In New York, anyway, with Fox and CNN and all these different stations.
Yeah, every one of them.
And then I know you moved, so I kind of sort of lost touch with you. And like you said, you moved away from actually doing the live network feeds and stuff like that. But you're considered an expert analyst on all this stuff.
Yeah, it's well, they don't do it because of my pretty face, that's for sure. So that's not it.
Joe, can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
What bothers me a lot, and you're great doing what I call just being a talking head. What bothers me is that when these TV people try to act like they're police experts and they don't know their ass from their elbow. One of the things that always irks me is when they call stop, question, and frisk when they call it stop and frisk. Yeah. I want to go to the station and slap the shit out of the person that said that, because the press has hijacked what is a procedure that the NYPD uses. It's called stop, question, and frisk. It was never called stop and frisk until the press tried to shorten it. How would they like 33% of their salary taken out of their check? That's what they're doing. Stop, question, and frisk, taking the question out of of stop and stop and frisk. They just took the question out. And you know how important that is.
Yeah, well, the stop and frisk, I'm on the record, correcting a number of people on that. I would say it's stop, question. I even say possibly frisk, because it's not an automatic. That's generally
right.
That's generally my last term I use with that, because like everything else, stop and frisk just makes it sound like it's automatic. Like the cop jumps out of the car, grabs the guy, and automatically frisks him. That's not the case. And I try to explain to them, with the Terry versus Ohio and that whole bit. I
don't want to hear about that. That takes up too much of their time.
Those are facts.
Yeah, well, like everything else, sometimes I get a lot of time, and sometimes I don't. Right? I always tell, I used to say, hey, listen, I'm on channel 2 tonight, but don't blink because you might miss me. Because I just do a quick hit or something. But I'm still teaching at John Jay. I still run into some of the news reporters out there. They'll call me up on a Thursday when I'm there. We run outside, we do a quick hit and go. But listen, in the beginning it was a lot more fun. Now, and I think it's not just fun, but I think it's important now, because we're trying to get a positive voice out there and try to explain to people that the cops are not the bad guys, and this is the way sometimes things go. Police work, as we know, isn't pretty. It can be really ugly sometimes.
Joe, we had Chief Louis Anamone on about a year and a half ago, and it was the first time he was on.
I got some stories.
He's great. He's one of my heroes on the NYPD.
I love the guy.
And at that point, we were talking about the national attack on the police. This was a year and a half ago, and how the police, that started with the cop having the water poured over him. Anamone wrote that great article for the New York Post about disrespect to the police, wokeness, and all that other nonsense. And it was happening over. And then, of course, you had that terrible incident.
Yeah, with Lou and Ramos. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Chief Anamone, he and I, we had a couple of, good things that happened, but some funny things that happened between he and I. But we don't have those kind of voices that come from the police department anymore. He just wrote another op-ed not too long ago. And it was in the New York Post. And, it's positive voices. And that's the other thing I've been doing too, is I've been doing a lot of writing. I've written a number of op-eds that were published, and I've had them in Baltimore Sun and Newsday, of course, Daily News, New York Post, and all these different things to try to get some other messages out there. And listen, you know what? When the cops do right, we have to stand up for them. And when the cops do bad, we as cops also have to say, well, this is bad,
Right.
And that becomes a problem for some people.
Look at the attack on the cops the other night. There was a demonstration downtown. It was 100 BLM supposedly the other night downtown. I think there was probably 15 to 20 arrests, but there was a reporter there who one of the agitators recognized, and they go, because from another protest, and they said he's a cop. They pointed him out as he's a cop, and then they attacked him. They attacked him on the idea that this person that was a journalist they thought was a cop because he had been in another protest, and they attacked him and they beat him with fists and stuff like that. And that's what we're talking about, the attack on the police. They saw, which is idiotic in a way. I mean, what kind of cop is going to be standing there by himself at two different demonstrations? But the reality is, those were the words that were said, according to what I read. He's a cop. So the fact that you would go out and attack a person that you thought was a cop because you outnumber him is interesting, to say the least.
Well, like I said, and what happens if he was a cop and he pulled out his gun and started shooting? That would have been even more interesting, because then we would have had that whole discussion about, why, what, and would have been perfectly justified. You're being attacked by a mob and you're being labeled as a cop. They know you have a gun, right? They could take it from you and easily kill you if they're willing to attack you, right? So this is something that could be a huge problem for journalists going forward. And I think it kind of shook up with some journalists too. I remember seeing them on the Twitter feed. I mean, they were very concerned about this because, at any given time, someone can mistake you for an undercover cop, and then.
Yeah, but in all fairness, a lot of people going into these demonstrations that are claiming to be journalists, they have no credentials. They have a YouTube page, and they're part of the problem. They're inciting, and then when they go to be arrested, oh, you can't arrest me, I'm a journalist.
That was the tactics of Antifa in Seattle, was to all have these bogus press passes. And
they're talking about taking that away from the NYPD now too, right? Giving out press passes.
Oh, that's beautiful. You
didn't hear about that?
Joe, I always say the most competent city agency is the NYPD.
People don't believe that.
Train wrecks of the other agencies, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, look at the mayor. Look at the mayor's wife. She was entrusted with $1 billion. What did she do with it? Well,
like I said, even look at the homeless services here. Look what this is the reason the police department is handing out vaccinations. The police department's giving out vaccinations. The police department is doing things that it should not be doing.
Right.
And people say they want to defund the police and they want to take police out, but here they are lining up, giving out vaccinations. And, I mean, there has to be some sort of reckoning with, like you said, some of the other agencies and saying that you guys got to start pulling your weight.
Well, some genius came up with the idea that vehicle accidents should be handled by the Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, because, when you're chasing, or someone is a DWI, or someone's fleeing from a crime and they get in an accident, let's send the Department of Transportation there to confront these individuals.
Every one of these situations, whether it's dealing with emotionally disturbed people and sending a clinician over first, or a car accident, a motor vehicle accident, and you're sending over the Department of Transportation, at some point, you're going to have to send a police car there, either to escort them over there so nothing bad happens to them. So now you got two cops sitting with them there, but they're their escorts. So now you're going to have to call another unit over to handle this situation, because you can't have the escorts do it, because you're probably going to have to escort this person out of the scene, whatever. So you're just doubling up on the manpower and all this stuff when you already had it in place. It doesn't make any sense. We're trying to, remake the wheel.
Well, like I said before, if people think you're going to remove the cops from this equation, I think they're mistaken, because they don't realize how much the NYPD is intertwined with just about every workings of the city. And there's going to be, listen, they were robbing EMS workers in Brownsville, right? They were calling in fake jobs and they were robbing the attendants, the paramedics at the scene. It was only a matter of time before they would have to be escorted by cops. It's craziness.
I don't know if you watched our show with Randy Jurgensen from the author of Circle of Six, but in 1972, the 2-8, the 3-2, and the 2-5 had 500 murders, those three precincts. So there were times that were much worse than this.
Oh, yeah.
The city did come back from it, but I don't know. That wasn't caused by wokeness. This is caused by just political nonsense,
Well, when I got promoted to sergeant in January 99 and I got sent to the 7-3, in 1999, the 7-3 precinct, we had, I think it was 88 homicides in that 1 square mile precinct. And I remember them, they were patting themselves on the back because they used to have like 120, 130, and I'm saying to myself, like, what am I doing here? I mean, the place was off the hook. I mean, it was 1 square mile. You would drive around the whole precinct in like 5 minutes.
Right.
And it was constant gun battles. And, I try to explain to people that you never want to see that happen again. You never want to, parents used to tell you stories like they used to put their kids in the cast iron tubs before they went to bed at night.
I remember
because the bullets were flying everywhere. I mean, do we really want to return to a situation like that? I don't know, but you know what? I don't know if we can make a U-turn right now. I really don't.
Yeah, well, what's funny is that the people that get hurt the most are the people of color, because these incidents and these shootings that constantly happen, that erupt whenever you come up with some cockamamie plan to defund the police or do some community, whatever it is that you want to do, it always winds up hurting those communities the most. And inside those communities are plenty of people that are just trying to live their life. They're not criminals. They have families. And now, they have to live in this area where there's nothing but shooting, nothing but gang violence, and they feel like there's no help coming because the police have basically been handcuffed right now.
Well, the Wall Street Journal just did an article a couple of weeks ago. They went back to, I think it was 2010. So the shooting, they went back and tracked every shooting from 2010 to 2020, and they came up with 96% of all victims of gun violence in New York City were either Black or Latino. That was like, I almost fell off the chair when I was reading the paper. 96 in the last 10 years, 96%. And the shootings that we saw just over the last year were about on the same level, same kind of percentage. I mean, that's kind of frightening.
Same thing in Chicago. Who's getting shot? Who are those shootings are happening every single night in Chicago?
But then they want cops to take implicit bias training.
Well, I mean, it's not, you're not even, getting involved with all that stuff. I mean, listen, we have a huge problem that started last year that really bubbled over. And, and listen, COVID isn't the reason why it happened.
No.
There's a confluence of things that happen. I know the mayor likes to blame COVID for everything, but listen, shootings and homicides were going up in New York City way before the lockdown started. And nobody wants to talk about that.
What's funny is that during the whole COVID, the pandemic, everything going on here in New York, de Blasio, he would come up with a couple of ideas that he wanted to do, whatever. And then Cuomo would kind of sort of hit him on the snout like a dog, the way you would shut a dog up. Hey, I'm in charge here. Keep your mouth shut. And he would have to go back. And now that Cuomo's right on the verge of getting one right up his ass, I'm talking, this guy is in such, you don't hear a peep out of him, his brother, nothing. The guy is he's going to get fucked right now. And the other day, de Blasio said, well, when they come to him for his quote, he goes, this is something we should really take a good look into. And how great is that?
A good look
this
into.
Is something we should take
15,000 people died in nursing homes. Maybe we should take a good look into
figured,
it.
They're going to him knowing that given the opportunity, he's going to give it right back. He got smacked down a lot of times where it was unnecessary. They could have basically worked together. And, he kept smacking him. down on the snout, and you know, de Blasio had to shut up and cower. And this is de Blasio's moment to stick it right in his back, man, right in his back.
Like I said, I don't really get into the whole politics bit of it, but one of the things that's looming that people aren't really discussing yet is that April deadline that Cuomo put out for the police reforms have to come out, or they lose city funding, or they lose state funding. Yeah, that's a big deal, because the city council just put up 11 bills for police reform to try to get this under the wire for April. And, you know, not all of them are terrible. You know, they're not all terrible. Some of them are just, you know, it is what it is. But some of them could be really bad, like getting rid of qualified immunity. I mean, if they get rid of qualified immunity, it's going to get ugly. And if you don't know what qualified immunity is, that protects the cops from being sued in frivolous lawsuits and the like. And it also opens up, which I don't think the politicians realize, is if they get rid of qualified immunity, it opens them up to lawsuits too, because if you get rid of it's a blanket thing for the city, and it would be a terrible thing.
Well, Joe, for our listeners, what that is basically, if you're a police officer, in New York, it's Section 50K of the municipal law, which indemnifies a police officer that as long as he's performing reasonably in his duties and he gets sued, the city will cover the damages and represent him in court with legal representation, and the officer will be what's called indemnified. They want to take that away, where a cop will have to get his own private insurance.
Right.
And if he gets sued, he'll actually have to hire his own attorney, unless
I think
the unions want to pick that up.
With what we talked about months ago, which my theory and my idea is that we're looking towards the majority of people who can afford it getting their own privatized police. And by privatized police, I'm talking about the way they do it in Long Island, where even though you have Nassau and Suffolk County, people couldn't afford it, they get their own little police departments. And I'm talking about little police departments right there in Manhattan, covering so now you, instead of using or relying on the precinct, which will be watered down a lot, you're gonna have your private security. And if they catch somebody, they bring them to the precinct and then they collar them. But you're gonna have a lot more law enforcement out there in this private security.
But who is going to take a chance, right? So doing police work, there's lots of risk you take, right? So you're running after a guy in a dark alley, or you're doing something like that. If this person now falls, are they going to be able to turn around and say, well, the cop is chasing me, so now I can sue him? Mm-hmm. I mean, it could come down to something as simple as that. I mean, and then who in their right mind is going to even do that? And the bad cops will do what bad cops do. The good cops are going to flee. They're going to go somewhere else. And the cops who always, who aren't doing anything, they're going to continue to do nothing. I mean, they'll be going back to report takers and the like.
Joe, I always remember that probably about 10, 15% of the cops did all the police work, the arrest-oriented work. And the rest, the 85%, basically were ambassadors, so now what percentage is going to actually do the police work? Like 5%? And the rest, 95%, it could be community police officers,
Well, like I said, even then, I mean, 5% might sound too much when you're dealing with a 30,000 person department. I hope they don't do it. If cooler heads prevail, I think they'll eliminate that part of the bill, because I think it would be really detrimental to policing in New York City. And I think it's going to really send a bad message to not only to the cops working and think about it. Could you imagine working on the job and worrying about if you're going to get sued, they're going to come after you, your personal assets and everything else every time you try to do something if you made a mistake or something?
And they're already allowed to release your disciplinary records to the public.
Right. So, and then they will be used against you in lawsuits, right? So here's where all of these things now come together into one big lawsuit. I mean, this could be detrimental to the average cop who really wants to do a good job and does things, and then all of a sudden makes a mistake.
You're in the you're not in the academy, but you're a professor at John Jay, and now that, I mean, you're there with the future police officers and anybody who really wants to get into law enforcement. They're studying criminal justice there, and what are you seeing with these kids that come out? I've seen a lot of kids that they all want to make a difference. They don't want to be like the cops before. They want to show everybody that we're not racist. We're not we're not racist, because that's what we've been labeled, right? And then they get out there, and all of a sudden they're on their third day of, dealing with riots and getting hit with bricks. And they realize that these guys on my left and right, guess what? These are my friends right now because I have nothing to do with the community right now. These are the only backup I have.
Well, I've been teaching at John Jay for the last 16 years now. And this year alone, I had gotten about 4 or 5 emails from students and saying, like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I had never gotten those kind of emails, which kind of makes me sad, right? Because it's a great job. It's a noble profession. No matter what the anarchists are screaming at you, it's a noble profession to want to be able to work with your community and make it a better place. And I feel bad for some of these students who have dedicated the last 3 or 4 years of their lives to studying criminal justice and really want to do this, and have now been kind of turned off to it. Not only turned off to it by what all the rhetoric they see, but nobody's hiring. And it's a real problem because you're having these kids coming out of the school, they're ready to work, and they don't have a job in policing because of all of the funding talk, right? They're not going to be putting any new classes in if you're going to defund. I mean, they're taking $1 billion, I think, away from, New York City Police Department. That's going to affect recruitment. It's going to reflect training. It's going to reflect a lot of things.
Joe, if you're a citizen in this city, right, and you have nothing to do with the police department, and you're living a nice life, you own your own apartment, your kids go to private school, and you're walking down the street, and someone comes up to you and sticks a gun in your face and says, "Give me your money or I'll shoot you," and they are serious. That's the moment in life where if you were a defunder, you're going to say, "Holy shit, I think maybe we ought to get more police." There's no anti-crime out there anymore. They disbanded street crime. The cops are not going to be proactive. So John Q. Wall Street is going to have a gun stuck in his face, and he's going to wonder, "Holy shit, should I even live here anymore?"
Well, I think that decision's already happening, right? I think a lot of people have already questioned that. I mean, there was a big op-ed that there was a young man wrote about, leaving New York, and he says, "I'm not coming back." And it made a big splash. And of course, there are people that always will poo-poo things. But I had mentioned this earlier in the show. It's about perception. If people think that things are bad and they need to get out and go somewhere. New York City, I mean, what is it? I think 75% of people that live in the city rent. They could pack up and leave at any time they want. And we saw this happen once before in the 70s, where people just fled. And then what are you left with? I mean, do you want to go back to those days? In the Bronx, when I first started working in the Bronx in 1990, I got into the 47 precinct in January of 93. There were still burnt out buildings everywhere. People don't remember that. There were some streets that were still dirt roads in the Bronx. Eli Avenue.
What
was that, Mayor?
I said we came out the same class, me and you. We were 92.
Midnight class.
Yeah.
We knew we were in trouble then. And the guys
a big thing also is that I think it's Cuomo has been threatening the stock exchange with some tax that they said if he does that, the stock exchange is leaving New York City. They said that. They absolutely said that.
You are great. They're really a pair. Oh.
I read that. Yeah. No, I mean, think about, it's not just this, people say, "Well, let him go." But what about all the jobs? What about all the, I mean.
Yeah, that genius AOC got rid of all those Amazon jobs in Queens. Remember?
Yeah. Oh, no, I remember that. I mean,
there's some woke people out there. They don't realize that jobs pay the bills.
It's a national problem. I mean, they just I think it's whoever makes Ford just moved its factory to to Africa, as opposed to leaving it in Chicago or building one in Chicago. So it's going around nationally right now. We're going back to a thing where we want to give out and let everybody else do our work. And where are we going to go for jobs here in America? I mean, how many stimulus checks are we going to get?
I don't know. Like I said, anything that I don't follow the politics really at all, because the only thing I follow is when my ears get up when they start talking about defunding the police.
Something. The police department is the most political organization in the world. So if you say you don't follow the politics, then you don't follow the police department.
Well, in the respect that I don't get involved in the whole, back and forth, tay-to-tay stuff. I understand
what you're saying, Joe. I agree.
I'm an observer. I like to listen and hear what everybody's got to say. And I try to be even though Mayo, you know, I mean, I was pretty quiet a lot of times. I would just sit back and watch whatever. And then if you remember, there was a couple of disputes that we had with our boss, and I would let him know exactly what, you know, but I'd have all my ammunition ready and ready to go and say, like, no.
To be, I don't want to be involved in politics. It's not my, like, I just want to take my money, take my taxes. I just want to perform. Just leave me alone. But unfortunately, we live in a time right now where they need our attention. And especially with the last administration, it was just every day, it was 3 or 4 or 5 different stories a day, pulling us in. And the reality is, I don't want to be in like that. But like Bill said, unfortunately, when we talk about police, it goes hand in hand. What we're going through in New York right now, what they're going through in all these big cities around the country, is the same exact thing. They wanted the fund, and now they're getting it right up the ass. They're getting a situation where, you know, now these politicians are having to answer for high crime, and that used to be what they used.
Will they answer to it? That's the question. Will they answer to it? I mean, we'll watch it.
When it comes to running, the next guy is going to come in and say, "I'm going to lower the crime." And once you come to election time, mayors and governors, the next guy comes in and says, "I'm going to lower the crime." Like when Bloomberg got done, de Blasio didn't have to run on, "I'm going to lower the crime." How low are we going to get in homicides here?
Yeah, we were below
11 million people. We got less than 300 homicides. So now the next guy who's going to come in, the 2 people are going to run because this guy's going to be out. They're all talking about police reform, but in the end, they're going to have to talk about what they're going to do about crime.
But they're not. If you listen to any of these candidates, they're all talking about how we have one candidate saying that she's going to be the sword against the NYPD. So yeah, you would think that cooler heads would prevail, but they're not. It's like, who's going to be over the top?
That's what they're saying now. Everybody's adding that on their agenda, police reform. But when it comes time for election and their ears are open and they're listening what people want, and people are like, "Yo, we can't have these subway stabbings, and we can't have these shootings all the time." They're going to change. I'm telling you, you're going to see they're all going to change, and they're all going to talk about how they're going to be tough on crime. "Oh, I'm going to keep the NYPD intact, but we're still going to be tough on crime." You'll see. That's what they're going to say.
Well, I can only hope so. But honestly, I don't have that kind of faith yet. I think it takes a long time before this thing does a 180 on us.
He's got another year left, this guy. Believe me. It's going to.
But Mark, there's no candidate that gives hope to anyone.
No, there aren't yet, but they all want to win. And when they see that they're all on the same page, when they look at all their agendas and it looks the same exact way, one of them is going to stick out and go, "Listen, we're going to keep the NYPD intact. We're going to make sure they behave themselves, but we got to drop the crime because a lot of bad things are happening." And then they're all going to jump on board. "Well, yeah, I'm going to fight the crime too." You'll see.
Yeah, but it's not that easy anymore because you have the state-run bail reform. You have the criminal justice reform coming out of the governor. There is a lot of working parts here. It's just not bad politicians in New York City. There's a lot of things going against you.
Well, a lot of those things they're gonna come up also with the elections too, and there's gonna be pushback and blowback. And if you want to get elected, they always got to do what the people want. And at some point, the people are gonna, they're gonna have enough. Look at what happened with the subway stabbings. You know what I'm saying? It's not a question of if they were homeless. It's just that could have been me. I need the subway to go into work because they won't let me park my freaking car anywhere. You know what I'm saying? They wanted to push the subways because they wanted to punish the people that have, and the people that have, they deem are people with cars. So that's what between the congestion prices that they want, pricing that they wanted to do with now it's low because they can't do it all. Bike lanes, all this stuff that they started doing. And now all of a sudden it's blowing back in their face because if people don't ride the subway, they're going to start driving their cars in again. Or you know what I'm saying?
It's not just people riding. No one pays for the subway either. That's the other problem,
Well, jumping the turnstile is becoming an issue, right?
Yeah.
So, and the MTA has even said it. It's becoming an issue.
Yeah, but those weasels in the MTA, the same woke people that are part of Cuomo's little band of idiots, because they went for all of this crap. I'm telling you, I have no patience for Cuomo and this guy de Blasio. They've destroyed this city, and it's getting worse and worse every day. Maybe Cuomo will get indicted over this nursing home thing.
Do you think he makes it? Do you think he finishes out his term? That's the question right now, because he's going to be charged. Listen, when he has to sit there and go, well, why didn't you use the boat that they sent you? And why didn't you use the hospital that the federal government put up for you? Because
the Javits Center was empty. They
were all empty. Yeah. They were all empty. The reason why he didn't want to use them because he didn't want to give him credit.
Yeah.
You want to say I'm using it. So now just to spite your face, you cut off your nose. It was so stupid. They didn't have to be in these freaking homes. They're going to ask him that question. Why didn't you use the boat? Why didn't you use the hospital we built you? Why didn't you use the Javits Center? And what is he going to say?
He just went to see Biden yesterday. He was probably tapping him on the head. All right, Andy, everything will be okay.
Yeah, but they bitch slapped him too because he said they were offering him $50 billion for New York, and he goes, "Oh, that's not enough." And they're like, "Whoa, wait! You asked for $15 billion first. We're giving you $50 billion. Shut the fuck up." That's exactly what they told him.
They're not giving him $50 billion, Mark.
That's what was in the paper yesterday. They're giving him $50 billion to New York State.
That's crazy.
And he's still complaining. They wanted $15 billion originally.
He was $9 billion in the hole before COVID hit. So he was.
I know. Well, they're always in the hole.
This wasn't caused by COVID. He was caused by ineptitude. You know. Well, I think he should have to give his Emmy back too. What do you think?
I think there's some Democrats. There's some Democrats that have signed a petition here in New York State for him to rescind his Emmy. Democrats.
How about the book?
Oh,
he writes a book patting himself on the back
in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Not even at the end.
Unbelievable.
Talk about hubris.
Oh man, what a joke!
It would be like us. It would be us, like writing up the medal for making up the before making the arrest.
I always love this line in a medal write-up: "With total disregard for my safety." I love that
one. Well, the only good thing about it, when you get the big medals, somebody else has to write them up for you.
That's right.
That's the only good thing.
I saw some guy wrote that. I was like, that's the best line I ever read with total disregard for my safety. I jumped in front of a truck.
I caught the auto stripper.
Right.
Hey, Rob123 says nothing's going to happen to Cuomo because the fix is in.
I agree with him.
I don't know, man. I think a lot of people are going to distance themselves. This is what this cancel culture is about. There's no unity. There's no sticking together. And they're going to, as soon as they see the heat is on this guy, they're going to separate. And I don't think he's going to have any friends.
Well, look, the attorney general that he appointed, she's going after him.
Oh, yeah. She said 50,
I'm amazed at that.
Letitia James.
Yeah.
15, she said 50% more, which brings the number from, I think they said 7,000 something to 18,000 people died. Because what they were doing was, if you got really sick in the nursing home, they were shipping you to the hospital where you died there. And then they said you died in the hospital, not in the nursing home.
Right.
And they sent you to the nursing home when you got sick. There was no reason to do that.
But he had like a hissy fit at one of the meetings. He was like, "What does it matter?" He did a Hillary Clinton. What does it matter?
Well, at one point he did say, "Well, they died, and what's the difference where they died? It's a huge difference.
There's exactly huge difference.
And you're taking an old age home, the people that are most vulnerable, and you're sending people who feel sick there."
Joe, what do you think of the mayoral candidates?
Yeah, I'm not impressed with any of them. I mean, you have, I think there's I refer to them as a gaggle. I mean, there's just so many of them.
Yeah.
And like I said, one is trying to outdo the other with police reform. And it's just, I'll go one over the top. And I'm going to say, oh, you said that? I'm going to go this far.
You would think that Eric Adams, being a retired captain, would be pro-police, but he's not.
No, he kind of, I guess, like everything else, sometimes people get jaded by the job. He left, whenever he left, who knows what happened to him. And,
Yeah, but he was always like that. He was part of that 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement. He was always a radical. It was a easy way to not really be accountable because everybody's scared to tell you to do your work. You know what I'm saying? When you're part of a group like that, it's like just leave him alone. Let him do whatever he wants. That's the way the NYPD is. Otherwise, you don't want to get jammed up. You know what I'm saying? Who knows where this guy's going, where he's taking the car? You know what I'm saying? Just leave him alone.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know exactly what made him leave, but like everything else, I think it's just that's the name of the game right now. Who is going to be the most anti-cop person is going to garner the most votes, and I think that's where it's headed.
How much you want to make a bet? I'm sticking my pinky out. How much you want to make a bet? This is all going to take a drastic U-turn by the time the election comes on, and the first person, because they're going to ask him a question: what are you going to do about crime?
What are you going to do about
crime? And they're going to have to come up with an answer. They're going to have to come up with an answer, and they're going to say, "Well, we're going to be tough on crime." And once one person says, "I'm going to be tough on crime," if he takes, they're all going to have to say the same thing. No, I'm going to be tough too, except we're going to do it's.
No, you know something, Joe, one of the things that came down from Albany is the concept of de-incarceration. You're familiar with that, right? That means they don't want anyone locked up. That's the policy coming down from, you know, from Andrew. And then given to all these DAs. Yeah, it's disgusting. De-incarceration, which includes bail reform and includes paroling dangerous people. It includes releasing cop killers. De-incarceration. That's what that's called.
Well, and it happened way before the criminal justice reform even kicked in. I think November of 2019, they released 900 inmates before the bill even became law in January 1st. And they let out 1,500, I think, in April.
From Rikers?
From Rikers and from state prisons.
Well, that Rikers real estate supposedly is very valuable. And I don't know if we
had
an island on here, Bill. Who do we have on here that was talking about that? Maybe there's a group that de Blasio's involved in purchasing that land once they get all the jails in. And
if that happened, would you really be shocked? I mean,
no, not at all.
But people don't. But people don't remember. There used to be jails in the other boroughs. Remember, there was one by Yankee Stadium. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
You know, people don't remember that, but they were there already. We already went.
They had the jail on the barge too. Remember that?
And the barge
for the overflow.
Bain, I think it was. The last name was the Bain barge, right? And was it the 4-1? I think.
Yeah.
That's the one that he escaped from in Carlito's Way.
I was on that boat a number of times, you know, with pulling out people to interview and stuff like that. When they told me that this was a cruise ship, I'm like, come on. It was a cruise ship. It was an actual cruise ship that they turned into a prison.
So this whole concept of decarceration is coming right from probably not even just the state, but the federal government too.
The question really comes down to is deterrence, right? What's deterring people from committing crimes? If there's no fear of the police, there's no fear of being prosecuted, and there's no fear of going to jail, what are the consequences then? So here's where the big problem is, and I always tout this. I say deterrence doesn't require jail time. If you can make the penalties and tell everybody what the penalties are, and they say like, whoa, you know, I don't want to do that then. I mean, there's no jail involved in that because the person didn't commit the crime. We used to do that, but we've gotten away from that.
Right.
Remember 3 years in jail for an illegal handgun? Remember those times?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't hear that anymore.
No.
You don't hear that.
Well, that's the same thing with the 3 strikes, you're out, though. And I think California proved that, and maybe that didn't work in the end, that last crime that you committed. Mike Colon says that Eric Adams is another. Bill Pepitone. Mike Colon brings up the fact that we had Bill Pepitone on. He's a retired member of the service. He's running for mayor. So he brings up a good point. There are people who are planning to run for mayor that, it's a long shot. I think it's a long shot for everybody, but especially
whoever's got the most money. Whoever gets the most money to back him is probably going to be the winner.
Well, you know, we always talk about, when Mark was talking about fighting crime again, making crime a priority. The city needs another Brian Watkins moment like it had years ago. Oof. When that kid was killed on the subway and his mother was attacked and he stepped in and was stabbed. And that was when the headline of the paper said, "Dave, do something." Remember that?
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. And that type of moment, we've seen some moments like that. The guy killing 2 people on the subway, stabbing 2 additional people. but it doesn't seem to get people's attention and bother people.
Well, I think New York City was so violent last year. I think it was a good thing that we were still on lockdown and people weren't around, because there could have been a lot of collateral damage. I mean, remember we saw that young boy, whatever, the 2-year-old or the 3-year-old, that was killed at the park by a stray bullet. Remember that one?
That's right.
You know, so but by not having a lot of people around, we probably fortunate enough that we didn't have all those other shooting
that college
victims.
student that got stabbed to death in Morningside
Tessa
Park.
Majors,
For
but that Brian Watkins moment, they were from Utah.
Yeah.
And they were visiting, and the city was up and running. They were going to the U.S. Open. And one of the things that was so tragic about that is just like, it's also, if people are scared to come here, then New York City is going to lose their tourist business. But right now, there is no tourist business. The only people that are dying out there and getting killed are New Yorkers, people who live here for the most part. So we're not going to have that Brian Watkins moment until this COVID is over, really.
Well, and not just that, though, but Mayo, what you're saying is true in that respect. But if we open up the city and people have to come back to work, and people who now have to come back to work are saying, I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to take the subways. I don't want to be on the trains. That's a problem. To get this city back on its feet, we need to get work back. We need to get people back to work, and we need to get the subways running again and everything else. But if people are fearful of that, we have a huge problem on our hands.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that I think the MTA is running billions of dollars of deficits now, because of A, people not riding the trains, and B, the people that are riding it aren't paying for it, and that's a huge problem too.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they were running a deficit or not. I mean, it's I think most of the city agencies are running in deficits. I don't think we've ever had a surplus on anything.
They had 20 billion people riding the train and paying for it every single day, and they still used to complain about money. So it's really like, oh yeah, now of course, yeah, they always complain about not having enough money. Trains always smelled. There was always a problem with the homeless, and there was 100 billion people riding it every day and paying. And now, so of course they're going to complain they got no money.
But Bloomberg always had a surplus. He was a brilliant manager. You could not like him for other things, but he was a brilliant manager as far as finances. And then it's like he handed this surplus to this guy, and it's like,
I think it was like 4 or 5 billion surplus when he took over.
Yeah. He spent it the first day.
Maybe he'll come back. He's obviously he made a mess out of that whole presidential running. Nobody. I don't think anybody will ever forget his.
Well, the stop, question, and frisk thing kind of did him into at the end.
Yeah, he should have stuck with the law and order. That was a winning thing, and he bailed out on that. He should have stuck to his guns and said, I did whatever I had to do to protect my citizens. That was a solid answer, and he would have stayed in there. But it also, he folded like a cheap suit when it came time to that debate. He got caught in the headlights. He probably. I don't know what happened to him that night, but he could resurrect his career and come back and run again. That's one guy right there.
He's about 80 years old now, though.
Yeah, I don't know about him coming back.
Giuliani's also another 80-year-old.
Oh God, no.
Giuliani's an EDP now, though. I don't know what happened to that guy.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we don't want to see Rudy coming anywhere near this place.
No.
He had somebody like that. Maybe Curtis Sliwa. Who knows?
I think I heard Curtis was throwing his hat into the ring.
No, yeah. I think he definitely is. And it's funny. I was watching.
He's run before.
You want to see an interesting documentary? Watch the Preppy Murder. It'll take you. It's on AMC.
And is that the Jennifer Levin case?
Yeah, it's a 3-parter. Mike Sheehan plays a prominent role in the whole 3-parter. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, Mike was a good guy.
And it's an interesting. It brings you right back to that time in the 80s, and it was. It's not like now, because now there's really no movement in the city. But it's once we get some movement, it will probably be right back there again, where crime was crazy. And
I remember reading the New York Post on that story. I mean, I used to love reading the newspapers, and when I was a kid even. And I remember reading about the Jennifer Levin case and Chambers and all that stuff. And I was like totally enthralled with all that. I mean, it was like one of those things where you remember where you were or where you heard something like this. We're old enough to remember the Son of Sam, and that kind of stuff. You know,
You know,
and
I'm actually going to do the on the 23rd. I'm interviewing a detective from Brooklyn North Homicide, Sean McTighe, and he was the catching detective on the Ahmet Sanguian case, which you know very well.
Yeah.
But the parallel there is that Dorian's Red Hand was where the
Chambers
case came out of, and the Falls was owned by Danny Dorian. So
yes.
here's two bars owned by the same family that had
Yep.
two of the biggest murders came out of them. They had something to do with it. So
it was not good for business for either one of them, though.
No. Well, I believe that the Falls went out of business over that, like they should have.
Well, the Dorian Red Hand was a place where teenagers from the Upper East Side used to go. They never checked IDs. That's something that comes out during the documentary. And in all fairness, nobody checked IDs back then, really, anyway. You could go into any bar or any place to drink. I don't remember ever getting ID'd. You know, I was 6'4" since I was 12, so I was going.
You were born 4 feet. Hey, when is this baby going to stop coming out?
Hey, let me see. We should probably give a shout out to the people that are still with us right now. A 12-step woman. He's very deserving of his new man cave, Mr.
You mean your green screen, Mark?
Yeah, you're amazing. Like this thing, behind every good man is a very good woman. All right, I don't know. That's amazing. A lot of people communicating on there. Mike Colon was again. Giuliani unfortunately started to believe his own hype. Yeah, he sure did. That's a funny thing about Giuliani is that, you know, he wrote in on the backs of the police department because that was a big thing with Dinkins. You remember we graduated together. I don't know about you, Joe.
We got hired under Dinkins.
I got everybody that I knew, even though the guy hired me. I wasn't smart enough to think, you know what, the guy hired me. I should probably be loyal to him. But we got everybody that we knew in my family and everybody else to go out. I never voted in my life. I voted for Giuliani that election. And then he gave us 3 zeros.
That's right.
Before 9/11, nobody cared for him that much. And then there's that one photo of him walking downtown, and the rest is history. He became a hero after that. So,
you know, the one thing about Giuliani is that a lot of people that deserved to get promoted under him didn't. For example, John Timoney should have been the police commissioner. And instead he appointed Howard Safer, who was a Fed.
That was bad.
And, you know, he didn't, I think he was intimidated by Timoney.
Yeah, Timoney went to Miami, I think, too, right?
Yeah, and Philadelphia, too. And Timoney was so sharp and so smart. Giuliani doesn't like people like that, you know, so he wanted someone he could control. And then again, Giuliani appointed Bernie Kerik when he had Joe Dunn. Remember Joe Dunn?
Yeah, I remember Joe Dunn.
He was the first dep under Kerik, but he should have been the police commissioner, really.
Are you referring to the Howard Safer?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, he had Kerik and then Safer, I think, right?
No, I think it was Safer first, then Kerik.
First, and then Kerik.
Yeah.
And Kerik was a detective.
Yeah, 3rd grade detective. And he passed over a 4-star chief who was Joe Dunn, who was a brilliant guy, was a CO to 7.5. He came up through the ranks, and he instead appointed Kerik over Joe Dunn. Yeah,
well, there's politics at play there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's politics.
I'm not going to criticize Kerik. I'm just saying, if you had a choice between a 4-star chief or a 3rd grade detective, who would you appoint to be the police commissioner?
Yeah, I remember, and I think wasn't Scott passed over too?
He was. I know Scott was at least a 3-star. I'm not sure what he ran near the end of his career.
Yeah, I mean, he got passed over, I think, even for the 4-star spot after Dunn left.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of good people that were up at the top that just left the organization. And you know what? In the NYPD, it's so big, but you know what? You need people who really were cops to you know, because we've seen when you had people who weren't cops who were in charge, what happened.
John Scanlon, they tried to give him transit, and he told Kerik, he said, "I'm not taking it." And I was at the Comstat meeting where he retired, and he was the Marine, man. He took it on the chin and didn't complain, you know.
Yeah, I remember him because he was a Bronx guy.
Yeah,
he was always there. I mean, we had some good bosses up in the Bronx when I was a cop up there.
Yeah, Scanlon, I think, had the 4.4. They said he was a
And he was
general.
in the borough. I think it was the borough commander too.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
It's hard
Joe
to
Reek-
remember now. We're looking at 30 years almost.
Yeah.
Joe Reek is on with us. Somebody's Robert123 says I'd support Curtis. Curtis is
something. I would support Curtis too, but I don't think he has a chance though. I think it's gonna go to another progressive.
The only way he could win is if he wears the red hat.
The beret.
If he wants to show up in suits and ties, it's not going to work. Nobody's going to know who he is. He's got to come out with the shirt, the hat with the pins in it. He's got to have get all everybody, the people that back him, like surround him, the other guardian angels, they also have to be his age. Like they started as teenagers and now they're 100.
But let me ask you a question. Do you think in 2020 we would still be talking about the guardian angels making a comeback in New York City?
Oh, they are making a comeback.
People want them now. Yeah,
I know. But did you think in a million years after we witnessed what happened over the last 20, where we were working and doing this stuff, that we would ever be talking about
back then.
The guardian angels again?
We didn't need them. You know, it's funny.
But that's where we are. That's where we are.
In the documentary about the Preppy murder, you see the guardian angels predominantly. They're in full force down at 100 Center Street on behalf of Jennifer Levin, because they had a defense attorney, Littman, that was really like turning her into a sexual predator. I mean, the girl died in Central Park. She was killed by this animal. And, this defense attorney was using the newspapers to turn her into a sexual predator, the sex diary and all this stuff. And it was the guardian angels who went down there every single day on behest of Curtis Lee, and they protested on behalf of Jennifer Levin to make sure that, she wasn't forgotten and that she stops being, abused in her death.
I mean, I ran into Curtis a few times, even working and stuff like that. I mean, these guys were the nicest guys. Even in the Bronx, when remember when we got out, we walked foot posts for how long before we even saw the inside of a car? People, the cops today, they don't understand. They get they get out of the academy and they go right in the radio car. I walked
8 months at least, maybe a year.
Yeah, I walked the foot post for a year on White Plains Road, and the train, the L, running right above you, sucking in all the train dust when it was going by. But and you ran into the guardian angels, and so they were riding the trains and stuff back in the day. And these guys were doing, and they were volunteers. They were doing it, and they were always nice guys. You talk to them, they talk to you, and stuff like that. I don't have anything bad to say about them, but I never thought we would be talking about them again, riding the subways. It's crazy.
Well, we're over an hour. Bill, you want to do a shout out?
Yeah, well, 12-Step Woman, thank you so much for that $5 super chat. Also, for our Patreon people, please, if you want to subscribe, we have 3 tiers, for $7 a month. You're called the Bucket. That's the Bucket tier. For $9 a month, you can polish my rack, and it's actually my rack you can polish. And for $11 a month, which is the premier tier of our Patreon, you can dip them in butter. And I won't tell you what you're going to dip, but that's up to you. The other thing I just want to shout out to all of our, as many as I can, Edward Kelly, our 12-Step Woman, Robert123, Peter Pranzo, and Richella Pranzo. You're our biggest fans. We love you. MC's Audio, you're going to be a great broadcaster one day. You already are. One day when Mark's not here or when I'm not here, I promise you we'll take you in here and you can do a guest spot. How'd you like that?
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great.
You may we may get fired. You're so good, Scott Wagner. Scott, keep pushing MC's Audio. He'll put you on his podcast. I'll ask him for you. Cat in the Hat, Ryan Investigation. Look, things aren't so bad. We're cops. We see sometimes the negative side of things, but we're actually very positive people, and things are going to get better. We hope. We just wish they would elect someone that would do the right thing by the cops,
It's ironic that Joe was the optimist on tonight's show.
He was, and we were
Joe. I'll be coming in with a big smile. I'm like, "What are you smiling about? Don't you know that this, that, and the other is happening?" I was like, "What?"
And please, if you haven't subscribed, I'm sorry, Joe. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to learn from Duty Ron. Duty Ron teaches me all this stuff. Hit the subscribe button. join our Patreon, take a photo with us. We'll shake hands, kiss babies. We'll do all of that stuff.
Joe, what are you working on now? What do you got coming up? Any books you working on?
Yeah, I'm writing the 4th edition of my textbook right now, and I'm actually going to, after I'm done with that, I'm going to write a patrol-oriented book, because some of the books that we use for teaching, it's like, this person never did police work, I think, because you're looking at it. So I think there's a need for that. So I'm going to write a textbook on police patrol and see if I can get that published too.
Good. You ever run into our best fan or our best friend, Maki Haberfeld?
Sure.
We love Maki. She's a friend
she
of the
hired
show.
me.
No,
she hired me. I owe
she's
her
great,
a lot.
man. She's
I have a special affection for Maki. I really.
She's feeling the pressure though of being surrounded by the wokeness. It's crazy.
Well, like I said, Maki is the one who gave me the job in 2005. I kid my students all the time. I said, listen, you're complaining about going through college for 4 years. I'm here 16 years. I'm working on my 4th BA here. So I don't want to hear any complaints.
So you do have a lot of books that you've written. How many in total now?
Well, like I said, the one book with 3 editions. So, and I get to anybody who's writing a book, you want to just write a new book instead of trying to write a new edition because it is 100 times harder.
How many colleges use that?
A lot. It's actually been even used. It was used for police promotional exams in the state of New Jersey for a number of years until they changed the law. I think about a year or two ago, they went back to a different system. But I was really fortunate with that. I think I had a run of about 6 or 7 years of that.
That's
great. So do you own the masters, like in the record industry? Like, are you getting a couple of dollars a couple of cents every time they use these books?
Yeah, no, I get royalties if that's what you're asking. Yeah, am I going to be driving around in $100,000 cars? No, I make minimum wage.
All right.
Hey, listen, minimum wage is everybody's getting a raise, so maybe I'll get a raise too.
Oh, Mark, just tell them who we have on Thursday.
Oh, I'll let you tell them. But before we do that, let's just give a shout out to the Silk City Hot Sauce one more time for being our sponsor for this episode. They're the best hot sauce in the world. They use small batches with pure ingredients. Locally grown peppers are the foundation of Silk City Hot Sauce. Get yourself some Silk. I've had now all 5. And I feel bad because Bill hasn't had a chance to taste it because I have it over here. And we haven't actually hung out.
We haven't seen each other in a long time, other than on Zoom.
I don't really know. I'll be honest with you, if your bottles are going to make it. If Jeff Levine is listening, maybe you want to send another batch for Bill because I'm dipping into his stats right now. But it's delicious. You can find it on silkcityhotsauce.com and make sure you put in your coupon code OTC for off the cuff. That's us, and you'll get a 15% discount.
I just wanted to say again, thank you to all our live chatters, especially Duty Ron, who's been hooking us up a lot. This Thursday, we have an amazing guest. His name is Dr. Stephen Washko, and he's a national expert on suicide prevention and wellness. And he basically helps out police departments, specifically the NYPD. We've had him on as a guest before. He's a brilliant man, a nice man. Please don't miss that show, Dr. Stephen Washko, this Thursday.
Joe, I want to thank you for
thanks for having me.
You haven't changed.
Good catching up.
You're as handsome as ever. I look
You
forward.
can take a screenshot and put it in the basement to scare the mice away.
We take a screenshot. We put it on Instagram.
You said to scare the mice away. That's funny. You've always had a great sense of humor. You hooked me up. You were my boss for a while there, a couple of years, and it was great working under you.
Yep.
And we wish you all the best. And thank you for joining us again. And you're always welcome here. If you got something to promote, let us know, and we'll get you on.
I will. Thank you, guys. Good talking to you again.
Thanks for coming on, Joe. All right, to all of our fans from Police Off the Cuff after